Okay, for context, I've just recorded myself explaining, and over 3/4 the way through I realized I haven't been recording. So I'm feeling a bit frustrated right now, but I guess we'll go on. So yeah. Okay, let me reset this. This is my attempt at making a controller for an octopus arm. It's basically a Bezier based controller. Bezier. What a Bezier curve is basically a curve that's drawn like this, similar to what you get in Illustrator. Oh, hang on. Alright, you get points like this rather than points like this. The problem with this is the points are not entirely proportional. Like there are 2 points to define the start and then 1 point each for the rest of the curve. The first problem with this is the point is not on the curve, so it feels kind of weird when you want to control it. Like it has to go very far just to push it out. As compared to a Bezier curve, the point is on the curve, and then the handles define how the curve curves. So that's more comfortable to the sense, but it makes more sense rather. I'm not sure if I can show you. Hang on, I think I can show the hull of this curve. Hang on, hull, yeah. So if you imagine display NURBS hull, hulls, yeah. So you see the points are not, the control vertices are not on the curve itself. As for this one, it is, and it's much easier to manipulate. So as for the start and end, they are similar, but at least it's consistent relative to the middle points, rather than this one where it's somewhat similar to the Bezier curve at the ends, but in the middle, it doesn't. It feels like you have to move that point away to draw that curve, which it doesn't feel right somewhat. So yeah, this is why I'm basing it off a Bezier curve. And the end result, I'm going to rebuild this for this video, would look like this, and the other one, hang on, this one. So yeah, so the controller will always be on the curve, or at least close to it, like very close. If I were to do this, yeah, it'll take a pretty unreasonable amount of stretch to actually make the controller go out of the curve, but that's only because of redraw errors. So yeah, so if I were to do this, and this, no, not like this, wrong, like this. So yeah. Oh right, one more thing. This is not the one. This is the one, and like this. And where's the other? Oh, it's not parented. Parent, 0. Hang on. And then child, parent. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, like this. So move it around. So yeah, I have. Not like that, I had that. Okay. So I have all this. This will take 4 curve. Yeah, this will take 4 separate types of deforming. They are all based on the wire deformer, what the rig is based off. I think I got. Okay, I'll start off with the main one, which is this. This is not a Bezier curve that's directly driving the deformer, because if you do that, the points will shear to where the controller goes, which is not what I really want, because I want the curve to define how the arm lays rather than where the points of the arm moves. Maybe to show you what I mean, I'll do this. Yeah, what I have here is the Bezier controller, the end effector, so-called the skeleton curve, and the arm itself. maybe I'll use this arm this time. If I were to use this to make a wire deformer directly, let me just do that. It'll look like what I did just now, but if I were to do this, the points will follow where the Bezier curve moves, which is nice for shearing, but the problem with this would be I can't draw a line and then manually shift it back. So imagine if I do this, and what it will do is actually move to, when it moves forward, it will actually bunch up and stretch out at the end, which is not what I want, and I just want to define where the arm is laying or moving, or it's basically what it's doing right now. So like how the arm, I want this curve to just strictly define the direction of the arm, not the shape of the arm. So what I will do instead, yeah, okay. So what I'll do, let me move this away. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll use this curve to control the skeleton curve. So curve 6, curves, no, wrong, deform, wire, and if I were to move, so it'll follow this. So if I were to briefly show the CVs of this, CVs movement, so when I do this, it will be exactly like what I did just now, which is where the points will move around. So what I'll do now is I'll select the curve I made earlier. This time I'll rebuild it, and I'll keep the original. So that will be, the original will affect the new rebuilt curve, and what it does is it'll create a rebuilt curve node that actively redraws every time there's a difference in the curve. So if I were to turn this CV off, so this is the original curve, it's still the same, if you can see, and gonna turn this off, turn this on, CVs, and then I'm gonna Bezier control vertex, and now I'm gonna lift it up, and then I'm gonna move it around. You see, now it rebuilds the curve along the old curve. So that's more in line of what I wanted in the first place. So if I were to use the hang on, deform, if I'm gonna use that wire to deform the tube right now, where is up, yeah. So yeah, that's the basis of how I want the curve to control the arm. So yeah, so I'll go this slowly, so I can move it here, move it there, so I don't have to worry about the bunching when it's moving back and forth. Think about this, it still has to strictly follow, like the first point has to come first, second, third. You can't move third between the second and first, and then you'll mess up. But you don't do this with a regular line in the first place. So it's not something that I mean, there's probably a way to detect which point should come in which order, but there's more complexity that I'm not sure if it's worth addressing. If I'm familiar with how a Bezier curve should be handled, like even in Illustrator, I don't usually I don't want a curve that automatically reorders the points on its own. So yeah, it's not something I want to address for the moment. So yeah, so that's step 1. So that's the main curve. The second is the shear, the weight. Because if I were to do, okay, no, it's not visible here. If I were to, let's say, if I were to do this and I shift out, you see there's a bit of slack as I go up and up and down and up and down. This one, the way I want to address this is to actually separate the tip from the main arm, so the tip will be more like a finger. That one I'll either have a separate joint system to deform that part of the finger, or another curve. I tend to want a curve right now because an octopus with fingertips is. Other than that, I kind of want some form of control of where the points should move. So like, okay, let me go back to the previous one. So I want to have a, I call it a weight. It's actually a shear along the curve points. So if I were to do this, goes back and forth. I intend for this to be a single dimensional movement, because if I do this, it will actually deform, it won't be right. So yeah, where is the second one? Yeah, here. So I want at least some control of this, so it'll be, imagine a stretch like that. The scale will be separate. Scale, deal with it last. So let's do the weight deformer. The weight deformer is a second curve that's, okay, I'll use a regular curve for the weight deformer. So okay, I should have done this in the beginning. See, spline wire. Hey, no, 16. Curve 7. No, that's the other one, isn't it? P controller. Okay, let's see, joint 6 is spline 6. So yeah, back to the weight. So curve 8 will be C. So what I'll do now is I will weight this as if it's a normal wire. Child, parent, control vertex. Yeah, so that's how it goes. It's like the shear that I didn't want just now, except that I have separate control of it this time. B controller up. Oh no. Wait, hang on. Okay, no, no, I've gone wrong. So the weight curve and the Bezier curve, the weight curve cannot deform the resultant Bezier curve. So that shouldn't be called the joint. That should be called rebuilt. B-I-L-T. And then, so I have 2. I'm gonna add the weight to the joint first. So deform wire, child, parent. Do one more time. Child, parent. So like this, here it works. And then control vertex, go up, still works, still working. Let me put this here. Maybe if I do this, and please undo later. And then the weight curve, let me edit it one more time, and this should, yeah, like this. So now if I bring it back, and then one more time, deform wire, child, parent, control vertex, and up and over, and weight and control and shift. Yeah, so that's the shearing curve finally. That's 2 of the 4 I'm gonna explain. The next is the twist deformer, which is easy to explain but very hard to, not, okay, I'm overstating this, but it's not very complicated, it's not very hard, it's just out of the way. I'm gonna lift this B and I'm gonna demonstrate separately on this arm instead of a tube, because this is much easier to look at a cross section. Once again, 1, 2 this time, and then, okay, the thing about the twist deformer is it has to affect a curve that's being an active wire deformer, which means that that curve is deforming a mesh or another curve or something, preferably a mesh, because so far we've been deforming a wire on a wire on a wire. If you deform a wire and then you do a twist on that wire and then use the end wire to deform a mesh, it will not work, because the end wire is still deforming the poly mesh absolutely, not relatively. So the earlier transforms it's all lost. So this one has to be done at the end, right on the mesh itself. So this is one of the things I only can do once I have the mesh, or once it's deforming something. The way around this, yeah, there's no elegant way around this. So not that I currently understand at this point, so I'll just do it anyway. So what I'll do, first things first, deform wire child, parent, curve point, select, and then deform, edit wire, wire drop off locator. So what this does is it creates a node that's very hard to select and very hard to control. You don't control it by the universal manipulator here, the transform manipulator. You pick a point through where it is relatively on the curve. So if I turn on X-ray, so now it's at 0 and the other end is 1. There's a param. So what it does is anything between 0 to 1, it will be on a point. So once I have this, let's say I move this to the middle, and then on wire 24 it introduces a twist on the locator. So on a regular wire deformer, let me pick one, there's no twist locator by default. Only when you select a curve point and make a locator out of it does it make a twist locator. So param. So if I were to twist, I go right now, and then if I were to move the parameters, oh, it's very sensitive. So I go round and round and round and round and round. So now I have means of twisting it, but it's a little unwieldy. So I want some sort of manipulator based control. So let me reset, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a locator, and here, oh no, here. Okay, now I want this to control the twist. Reload left. Okay, so I've loaded the locator on the giving side and the wire on the receiving side. So here, reload right. So rotate Z, go to wire locator twist 0, index of 0, which is the first one, I added. So now I have this and it works. The problem now is if I were to move this elsewhere, or let me say I follow this down, I turn, well, yes, it turns, but where it's turned is actually the end, which is not what I want. So what I'll do now is nearest point on curve, I'll load it to the right and then on the left. Okay, so what this does, it gets a point and then it gets a curve. It takes a curve, and then the point of the curve that's closest to the point that this node receives is calculated by the node, and then it'll be given as a relative point of where that point is on the curve. So it's best if I show you. Options, display, so world matrix, and then nearest point of the curve, other. Okay, no. Oh no, I think I want a shape. Where's the shape? World space goes to other input curve, and then the second point, which is the locator, translate here to in position. So now if I were to select it, if I were to move it, the parameter will be there, but it's still not affecting that point. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna get the nearest point curve, the output, and what's the number of the wire? Wire 24. Result, okay, I'm gonna use the connection editor for this. Input, result, param, wire locator parameter for number 0. Okay, so hopefully that point, it won't be moving on the display, but if I were to do this, move it down, yeah, that's how I do it. So there's gonna be multiple of this, less the frustrations. So that's the third one. The fourth one is much simpler. Okay, before I move to the fourth one, so if I'm gonna have multiple, I'll just repeat the steps over and over and over. For purposes of this arm, I wouldn't have more than 5. Depends on how many bend controls I want, basically. So this is the one with 2. So if I were to bend the other way. Okay, let me undo everything first, and then turn and turn. So one thing of note is it will tend to candy wrap when it's moving too close. While I'm at it, I wouldn't use a separate locator for it, but for the purposes of prototyping, I want it to be sure that that's the absolute thing that it's controlling. So That's why I have a locator there to be sure that it is what it's doing. So what I might do for a proper rig is I'll just use the controller's z-axis to move directly, because if I rotate right now it does nothing, but if I rotate the rest, it does this for the pointing direction. It doesn't do this for the rotation direction because it doesn't affect the roll of the wire, not the mesh. Remember, this thing controls the wire. And there are two ways I can go about doing this. One is to parent to the controller, which I've done right here. The second way to do this is to move it relative to the curve itself. So the advantages of the first one, when it's controlled by the controller itself, is there's more direct control from the controller itself to rotate the arm, but the thing is the rotation deformer always follows the controllers. And sometimes I would want in between the controller, a bend specifically in between the controller. So let's see if I were to make the controller itself the one that's controlling the rotation. The other way is to make a separate rotation specific controllers to turn it individually, so it's not affected by the length of the direction of the arm. So the way I'll do this properly is these locators would follow the base curve. So by follow, I don't mean you know the step just now where I put the input of the nearest point on the curve node. Instead, I'll just parent it directly to the wire locator switch. I'll probably find a way to parent it directly there so that I wouldn't have to deal with where is what in all those. And then from there I'll just select that point and I'll twist. So and then the parameters, I'll have multiples in even steps along the curve. The bad point about that is, if I were to need it to be as flexible as what it was, it will be very hard to keep track. Maybe I'll have another track that follows that curve, and then I'll put the locators on that curve track. I think that's doable. Yeah, it's more complex and might be worth it, but for a simpler setup, parenting the twist locator to the controller, or having the controller itself control the twist, would be easier. But for a more granular one, it will take a bit more effort. For the design of the rig itself, yeah, it'll depend on how the animators would want that kind of control. Like if they I mean personally, I have both options in my mind, and unless I test it myself, I wouldn't know which would be the better way of doing it. So that's the twist controller. Yeah, I don't think I've done a good job explaining the latter half of the twist controller, but the last one is pretty simple. It's just a muscle. It's not exactly a muscle, but it's a means of editing where the thickness of the arm. When I clench this finger, it bunches up the muscle actually kind of bunches up. I want some control over that to show that the arm is exerting a force or being squashed, or if it's being stretched, it would stretch out. I want some form of degree of doing that. What I did is just a section of the wire. This muscle deformer, so-called, just bear with me here, this muscle deformer can only be applied on the mesh itself. So right out of the gate, it should look like this. What I've done is I've parented the base wire into the controller wires, and then after that I made the base wire longer than the controller wire. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, but I'll play around with it. I'll play around with it and see how it works. And then after that, the drop off. Okay, if I don't touch the drop off, if I scale it right now, 2, it's fine actually, but there's a forward pouch. So what I did is scale. I'm gonna 2 so that it drops off more evenly. So the side effect of that is it starts bunching up in the center, which is not desirable. Maybe I'll use it strictly for the top, or maybe not as drastic. Let me drop off. Let me reduce the drop off with it. Okay, let me reset that one. Okay, this. You know what? This is actually better. Yeah, I should have done this. I mean, compared to this. Yeah, so it doesn't jiggle. So I'm gonna have multiple muscle deformers again, so-called, because it's actual term, and I should call it something else. So these inflators are gonna have more of them. The way I control it, I think I'm gonna use another point and curve node for each of them. It's gonna be quite heavy, but yeah, for this I'll definitely want this to be controlled at the controller points itself. This deformer, unlike the shear deformer I was attempting just now, this deformer is under a single wire deformer node, so edit wire and add, and just keep adding. That one is much simpler. The only difficult part is to get the point on the curve where it is. So I'm gonna get the closest point from the controller to that controlled curve, and then I'll use that to drive the position of these curves. And then as for crossing, it won't be doing this, but if for something else, if I don't want them to cross, it will look like this. But if I want them to cross, which is to say that both effects will stack, I'll turn on the crossing effect. It'll add up. So imagine if one is to increase and the other is to decrease. This is the pinch and this is the inflate, and then it'll somewhat cancel each other out. Let me exaggerate that. And yeah, so it's not a binary thing. There's an in between, so you can control like how much of the effect you want, so on, off, or somewhere in between. That's the bunching, the exerting deformer. I don't have good names for all this. So yeah, those are the 4 parts to the octopus controller, the octopus arm controller that I'm trying to create. Obviously, for a simpler situation like a regular animal's tail or a snake in general. Okay, for example, a dog and a cat's tail. A dog's tail doesn't twist. If it does, it will bite you. And then same for a cat, so it doesn't twist like this. So the rotation deformer isn't as strictly needed, because all it does is bend this way, bend sideways. Because it's mostly skeletal, so it's rigid that way. Same for a snake, where it rotates everything rather than individual parts. I mean, there's still a bit of give to the side, but I wouldn't. Maybe for a snake I would, but yeah, a snake might be a bit more involved, because the feet of the snake, so-called, is the belly of the snake, so it crawls with the belly on the surface. So you might want like if you want to transition from a ground to a pole or a tree, I would want that kind of transfer of rotation. That's another thing. The trunk of an elephant, the trunk of an elephant is similar to the arm of an octopus, so that falls under that. What else? A rope? No, don't use this. Just stop at the Bezier deformer. This is way too complex for all this, so don't rig a rope like how you would rig an octopus arm. It's not worth the effort. Okay, before I go off and do this proper, I'll probably describe the history of maybe not fully describe, but I'll just briefly go through how much I've been putting myself through in figuring this out. Okay, earlier on, remember this, the nearest point and curve thing? Yeah, it took me a surprise discovery to figure out how to twist the arm, because at the point of time I was figuring out how to make the controller stay on the point of the curve, which I probably had it backwards at the time. So I was trying to get, instead of having the curve follow the controller, I was trying to figure out if I could like make the controller follow the curve, which is backwards. But on the way, I found this node, the nearest point on the curve node, and sometime later, which I didn't have the time to work this on continuously at the same time. It's both a discovery of this node and of the nearest point on the curve node and the curve point node, which I'm not sure if I'm able to select it anymore. Why shit? Hang on, let me see if I can get everything back. Locator shit, I think this is it. Yes, okay. Yeah, it's only when I've discovered these 2 nodes, the nearest point on the curve node and the wire drop-off locator. Only when I discovered that, I realized that I could actually turn it directly. So instead, at a point in time, I was playing around with having 4 curves around a central curve, which is, oh my god, no, that's not efficient. I really want this to be not say a single wire, but a single central core wire at the time. So after discovering the twist node, it does what I wanted it to do. The problem is I didn't manage to completely contain all in one single central row of wires, because I couldn't get the shear to follow the main deforming wire and yet be able to transform what they're meant to do, like the shear wire to move the weight around and the muscle wire to follow around, and inflate or deflate. So yeah, it's pretty complicated at this point. I don't think I've done a good job at explaining what pertains to creating this. Okay, I'll come back with making that one final arm, and then I'll close off everything, because I could have done this on the way, but yeah, you know. Actually, you don't. I should know this better, but yeah.